Start writing the framework. Create the folders and configure the web server. First, let's create the folder structure for our framework. Remember, we're not mapping files and folders to URLs directly, but we'll look at this in more detail in the next video. So this is the root of our web server, where our index.php file currently is. First, let's create a folder for the application files. This is where our application code is going to go. Controllers, models and views. Let's create subfolders for each of those. Next, let's create a folder where our framework code is going to go. In other words, the core of our framework. Next, we'll add a folder for log files. Next, a public folder, which is where the publicly accessible files go, and we'll come back to this folder in a moment. And finally, let's add a vendor folder, which is where we'll put any third-party library code. So here we have our current web root, and if you have these folders left over from your AMPPS install, you can safely delete those. So let's go ahead and create the folder structure. And there we are. So as I mentioned, the public folder is the only publicly accessible folder, the only folder accessible to the web. It's the root of the web server. In other words, the folder that localhost points to. The front controller, which we'll discover in the next video, and any static files like CSS, images, JavaScript, and so on go in here. The big advantage of this is that most of the code of our framework and application, including database passwords, for example, is not in a web accessible folder and is therefore more secure. So to have this as our web root, we need to configure the web server so the root is not the current root, but it's the public folder. So let's go ahead and do that. So here we're using AMPPS, and to change the configuration in Apache in here, we go into the Apache section and click on Configuration. And what we need to do is scroll all the way down to localhost virtual host settings and change the document root directive. And we're just going to add public to the end of that. Simple as that. We'll save that file. And now we need to move our index.php into the public folder. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll just change this so we know we're getting the changed file when we restart the web server and have a look. So let's go ahead and restart the web server. And now if we look at localhost in a browser, we can see we're seeing our updated index.php as the root of the web server. So we've correctly configured our folders and configured the public folder as the root of the web server.